Action.
We're here today with Helen Goodman, and today is
Sunday, August 10th,
2008,
2008.
and we're here in Boynton Beach.
On my lovely piazza.
Yes, yes. So I guess where we wanted to start was where your parents were born, when your parents were born, and where they came from.
Unfortunately, my parents never talked about their childhood or their life in Europe, and I never thought to ask them. I do regret it. My father, the only thing I know is that my father was born in Warsaw, Poland. I don't know the year. I think he came from a fairly well-to-do family.
We did have one question from a long time ago. We were talking about earlier, the gypsy story about your mother. Clara used to talk about being stolen by the gypsies. What's that
My mother,
story
yeah,
about?
Well,
This
she
was
just,
in the old country.
and she was in on a gypsy caravan, and she's sitting in the front seat with a bunch of gypsies, and the neighbors saw her and grabbed her away. But otherwise, I would grow up to be Muhammad. I'm glad I'm not a gypsy.
So how do you think this really happened?
I have no reason not to think so.
Okay. Do you think that was a true story?
Yes.
Is that what you do?
Oh, yeah.
That she was found by some neighbor?
Yeah, that's exactly the story. She was 2 years old, and the gypsies scooped her up and took her, and she was crying, and a neighbor saw that and went over and I guess threatened the guy in some way, and he released her.
The gypsies didn't have enough of their own children. They were going around stealing
Maybe
children.
they sold them.
That's terrible.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they sold them into prostitution.
Is this a joke? For real?
I don't know, sweetie. I'm just imagining what could have happened.
Yeah.
What could you do with a girl? You couldn't make her a housewife.
I don't know much of anything between that time and he married my mother. I don't know how they met. In Europe, he was what is known as a yeshiva bucher, which meant that he did studying. He studied the Torah, and he never worked, he never had a job. Of course, he was still young, and when he came to this country, he had no craft, nothing to earn a living, and somehow or other he happened into, got a job in a shoe factory. They manufactured, it was all handmade ladies' shoes of very, very expensive quality.
My father was born in, I think, Vaslui or Bozio. My mother was born in Vaslui, but it's really immaterial. These are just names. They have no geographic content. So that they were born in Romania.
Do you know what year they were born in?
Nope.
No? Okay. What were your parents' names? We should probably have that in
My father's
there
name
too.
was Ben. My mother's name was Clara. My sister's name was Diana.
And his name was?
His name was Israel Steinberg. He had many sisters and brothers. I know from old pictures that some of them were in the army. The men were in the army, but some of them died. Most of them died. He had a sister who went to Israel and remained there and had her family. He had 3 sisters who came to this country, and they were my really beloved tantas. We were very close.
My father worked in leather goods. They were trunk makers, and they made luggage, suitcases, that sort of thing. In Romania, and when he came here, he did that initially, but there wasn't much market for handmade stuff. Most of the stuff was mass-produced by that time. So he went into the candy store business.
I think both my mother and father were, on. My mother was not a young woman when she married. I mean, she must have been about 27. And so I guess my father was about the same age. So what he did between the time he came here and the time he got married, I don't know.
very hard way to make a living. Long hours, 7 days a week, 24/7. That's a hard way to live, hard way.
His sister's names, one was Tante Esther. She was the oldest, and she was lovely, although all the family thought that she was a very cheap person because they said she used to go to the market and press the fruit and then say, "This fruit is bruised, I should get it cheaper." And so everyone used to talk about her, but for Mildred, my sister, and I, she was a wonderful tante. She was married to a lovely, lovely guy who always kept little toys in his pockets, and when we came there, we would reach into his pocket and choose something. He also had a very large closet with a lot of stationery things, clips and paper clips and pens and pencils and pads, and I would love to go in there and choose something. When we moved to Corona, I must have been a tot. I was born where Mildred was born, on Kelly Street in the Bronx. It seems that everybody was born on Kelly Street. It must have been a ghetto, because everybody you talk to says, "Oh, I was born in Kelly Street," or "My sister was born in Kelly Street." So it must have been where a lot of the immigrants settled. But when I was probably too young to remember, we moved to Corona.
And Corona's in Queens?
Corona, Queens, which is a very small town, very small town. The business street is probably 6 or 10 streets. It was really, really small. And they opened a store, and it had an apartment in the back, and we lived in the back of the store, but it was really spacious and comfortable, and a very nice place to live.
Like how big of an apartment, how many bedrooms?
Well, 2 bedrooms, dining room, kitchen. I don't remember that particularly, but when I was growing up, from the time I was 8 or 10, maybe even younger, I remember they moved 1 block away to open a larger store, and we had a larger apartment, and that was beautiful. We had a lovely sunroom like this, like my patio, with the sun shining. We had a backyard where my sister and I planted flowers, and we planted vegetables, which the rabbits ate. But we had it was beautiful. It was a wonderful place to live and grow up.
Were you and Helen close when you were growing up? Were you good friends when you were growing up?
Very close,
Yeah?
always.
Remember anything about Northern Boulevard?
Sure,
What?
we had a store there,
That's right. And
Yeah.
what kind of a store was it?
and we had fun. We had a backyard,
Mm-hmm.
and we used to give plays and charge admission.
You and Helen?
Yeah, and some other friends.
Uh-huh.
My mother became a seamstress. She was very talented. And when I was a young girl, I used to love to see her sew. She became a milliner, and she sewed hats, and she designed and sewed her own hats. But as a child, I remember her sewing. She would make clothes for my sister and myself, and I would love to watch her hands fly. It was just so graceful and so quickly that she would sew. So she became a milliner, and I don't know how she started. I only know that, remember that she had her own store.
She did.
She had a millinery store in the Bronx, where I was born. And apparently she was quite successful. She was very talented, and she did good work. And I think she was pretty successful.
The first store was on First Avenue and 22nd Street in New York City. And they had another store in Washington Heights on 175th Street in New York City. And then they had the store in Queens,
These were they had one store at a time?
one at a time.
Were they successful?
They were successful, yes. The stores were a good source of income, yes.
And you and Diana both worked in the stores after school?
No, I did. I worked in a store. Dana never worked in a store.
Okay.
Dana said I had to stay home alone, and that wasn't good for a young person because she didn't like being left alone in the house. You know, you can imagine what it would be like. So she resented that, but there was no help for it. So when I could, I went home and stayed with her. But I was needed in the store, and the papers, the next day's papers, would come at about 11:15, and a lot of people would wait around for that. And after they came, why, the crowd melted away, and I was able to go home.
Did you work in the candy store? Because Hal remembered working in the
Hal
candy
did.
store.
Hal did. They didn't make those kinds of demands on me. Once in a while, I would help out. Once in a while, I would help fold the papers. Sometimes on a Saturday night, I would help out. But they didn't ask me to do it. I would have been happy to, but they didn't ask me to do it. But Hal did. I remember one story he was behind the counter making somebody an ice cream soda, and he had somebody from out of the area come and leave him a tip. And he was so shocked. I mean, you know, the owners never got to see. He said, no, that's not necessary. So that shows something about Grandpa, that honesty or...
Yeah, for a 9-year-old, that's hard work.
So how
It
did
isn't really hard physical work. You just stand behind the counter, and they ask for a pack of cigarettes. You give them a pack of cigarettes, and they give them change if they need change.
They worked very long hours, very hard. My father used to carry these heavy cases of soda from the basement up, you know, storage. It was a hard life.
Did you have to work in the store, help out in the store?
I didn't
Your mom's
have
store?
to, but I loved the store. From a very early age, all my free time was in the store. I loved to. At that time, my parents had this large store. They also, in addition to millinery, they had dresses, and it was like a mini department store, but very, very mini. And I loved, we sold stockings, and the stockings were in boxes, and I would love to straighten the boxes. I love to be in the store, even on weekends. And from that very early time, I knew that I was going to be in business. I loved to be in business. And when it came time to make a decision about what I wanted to do after high school, there was no question. I wanted to get a job.
But when I went to high school, I went to a high school that was competitive. You had to pass an examination to get in. And it was part of the Board of Higher Education. It was attached to City College.
What
It was
was
called Townsend Harris.
Okay.
And you got in through a competitive examination. And I had to take a subway to go to school, and it was a long trip, but it was worthwhile all in all. And I enjoyed attending Townsend Harris. And I met a lot of bright kids.
But he was very bright. And sibling rivalry makes me say, and my mother never allowed me to forget how bright he was.
But unfortunately, there were no girls in that school. So,
Was this mostly a science and math kind of a high
yeah,
school?
yeah,
It was a
yes,
science and math?
Yes, it was.
And how many kids, let's say in your graduating class?
Maybe 90
Okay.
in my graduating class.
And what year was that? What year did you graduate?
1940,
Oh, okay, okay, so right before the war.
right before the war, right? And from there I went on to, I went to a lot of colleges. I went to City College. I went to Purdue. I went to a lot of them.
Why?
Oh, because I wanted to get into veterinary school. And it was impossible for New York to get into veterinary school because there are only about 6 in the entire country at that time. Now there are many, many more. And if you apply to a school outside of your state, they say, well, you have a school in your state, you have to apply there. But, you know, there were so many kids that
Yeah.
applied that they said, you know, we have to satisfy the community that needs us, you know, the farmers and the, so we don't want kids that are gonna go out and open a small animal clinic. We don't want those.
Oh, really?
Well, people want to go out to the farm and treat large animals. So to get into a school in New York was,
The experiences that I remember, it was, I guess, over a Christmas vacation or something. He comes home with the skeleton of a horse's head, and that sat in my mother's living room until I guess he took it back to college. I don't remember, but I do remember the horse's head.
Because he was studying to be in veterinary school?
Right, because he was studying to be a veterinarian, but he never did become a veterinarian. He changed courses.
so veterinary medicine was not really a very good option. So I decided on, well, eventually I became a podiatrist.
When I graduated high school, I knew I wanted to go out into the business world, but I also knew I wanted to go to college. So I decided to go to college at night and start work. My parents sent me to a pretty expensive, one of the better business schools. And it was a 9-month course, and I did typing, shorthand, bookkeeping, and how to behave in an office and everything. And it was a really, really well-known school, which didn't matter in the end at all.
What was the name?
Merchants and Bankers. I don't think they exist anymore, but it was very well known at that time and highly thought of.
Then World War II started. At what point did you join the service? Did you get drafted, or did you volunteer?
I was drafted and I went into service and I didn't see combat. I just had civilian duties. And I went to Fort Riley, Kansas, and I spent some time in and then I volunteered for OSS, and they came around looking for people who wanted to jump out of airplanes behind enemy lines and land from a submarine on an enemy coastline. And I know the Army doesn't do that. That's bullshit, son. I think I'll do that because that's one sure way of not doing it. So I volunteered for OSS. OSS was an organization that gathered information and had some field potential for operating behind enemy lines and blowing up bridges, and they did some of that, but mostly gathering information.
He was with the OSS, and then he was transferred to Burma, still with the OSS. He never talks about his experience with the OSS, whether he had any spying connections or not. I don't know. I know it's coming out now that a lot of people who were with the OSS were really spies, people whose names we know, but he never talks about that time.
Oh, you were in England.
Yeah, and I went to to China.
Really?
Yeah, with OSS, but always as a radio operator, and it was interesting. No girls? Did they have any girls?
They sent me out on a job, and in those days I had to be dressed properly. I went for an interview. I wore a suit, stockings, heels, white gloves, and a hat. I applied for the job. It was in a dinky warehouse building on 22nd Street between 6th and 7th Avenue in Manhattan. It was a printing company. They printed foil labels, the type that you would find on a candy box that may give the price, a gold label that may sell the price, or on a perfume vial that would have a very fancy, some of them were very fancy labels in different colors, but on gold or silver foil. And I got the job. I started at $8. I worked 5 days.
$8 a
Week.
Oh,
$8 a week, and I worked 5.5 days.
You're back in New York?
Yes.
What did you do then? So this is like
I went to school, I went to
1946.
podiatry school,
Okay.
and I did that until I graduated, and then I opened a practice
And where was the podiatry school? It was in this. Where was the podiatry school in
in
Manhattan?
New York City,
In New York.
on 124th Street.
Is that same school where Lissy went?
Yes, yes.
Okay, and what we wanted to ask you was, we already talked to Hal, but just how you met, what your early courtship was like.
Okay. I was visiting this bordello at,
Come on. That makes
no,
for,
that's not true.
that makes for a good story.
I went to this dance, and who do I find there? Well, I won't tell you about her, but I met Helen too.
What do you remember, Helen, about the dance? About what you
I went to the dance with my sister Mildred and a couple of her friends, and we were hanging out, and then I was thirsty. And something I never am thirsty. I never drink water, as everyone will attest to. And I went to the water fountain, which was along the side of the room. And there was Hal, came over and asked me to dance. I have never
Danced before.
never been thirsty to drink water, and I have never drunk water since. ever, since I met my husband. Anyway, he asked me out. I told him he didn't have to take me home because I was going home with my friends, and he got my number and he called and we went out. It was not instant. We got used to each other. No, he was good looking. He was a really good looking guy who didn't know how to dance, but I forgave him for that. My toes were never the same, but
I was a
he
toe
learned.
doctor.
He learned through the years. He learned. That's right. He was a toe doctor. But when we dated, on the second date it must be, Hal told me that he had been married and divorced. Back in those days, that was a pretty serious thing. I never thought I would meet somebody who had been married and divorced and had a child. So I have to confess that it set me back quite a bit in my thought about being serious with him. And I worried about the impact it would have on our marriage and the impact on our future children.
I married Adele when I was in the Army, and I was about 20 years old.
Okay.
We lived in the same neighborhood. We lived a block away, and then we were divorced pretty soon after, about 6 months after we were married. We still are not close, but we keep in touch.
Mm-hmm.
But we're not close.
What year was Elizabeth born?
1948, maybe.
Okay.
And my parents were very unusual. They never said anything about it. They never commented on it. They never said, yes, bad, no good, whatever, the other way around. But they never voiced their opinion. Don't pan. And for 3 years, he courted me. And for 3 years, I enjoyed it because he took me out to eat every weekend, and that's the way of my heart. And so we decided to get married.
Was there anything interesting leading up to your wedding day?
Well, would you ask me what day we got married?
What day did you get married?
We got married December 23rd.
But-
Right? Yes.
But you said, well, I said the day was the 25th.
Well, I did say we were married on the 25th. However, the secret is out. The secret is out, but it's between us. Well, how's it going to be between us if you're showing the film?
oh boy.
I don't know.
If you're going to show the film to people we know. Well, anyway.
That's 50
Well,
years.
then it's up to you, then if you want to kind of cut
Well,
this part out.
I'll tell it
It's
to
50
you.
years ex post facto.
That's right. I'll tell it to you, but I don't want you to show it to,
Anyone else?
any of our intimates.
Okay.
Hal and I were married
2 days.
December 23rd, 1951. To everyone else, we were married December 25th, 1951.
But we
The
got a
reason
little practice
we went,
beforehand.
no, we didn't. We had to go for our blood tests. When we went for our blood tests, we were told that since Hal had gotten his divorce, his ex-wife had gotten her divorce in Florida, the laws were different. The rules were different in Florida. Florida, you went for a quickie divorce, which is not recognized in New York. I was furious.
I was Presbyterian.
The whole, the hall was taken, the announcements were out, the RSVPs were in. This was a matter of a week, I think.
So he would have been a bigamist, is what you're saying?
No, he would not have been a bigamist, he was divorced.
Oh, he was
In New
divorced.
York, he would have been a,
Yes, in New York, he would have been a
a
bigamist.
Yes, I was so furious with him that I didn't want to talk to him. We didn't know what to do. Everything was all arranged. I called one of my sister's friends who was a lawyer. I told her what had happened and she said, well, the only thing you can do is get your blood test, get married in New Jersey. So Hal had an uncle who lived in New Jersey. We called him, he had some pull at the courthouse. I think it was a Friday, or maybe it wasn't a Friday, but it was close to closing. It was pouring outside. We rushed out. His wife got a rabbi, and his uncle's wife got a rabbi and a chuppah, and Mildred and I and Hal ran. He did not tell his parents. I didn't tell my parents. We rushed to Jersey. We got the papers, the blood test. We got the papers. We went to his uncle's house where we were married. And all I remember of my wedding day was this dark, dark apartment with a chuppah and this old rabbi. And my sister held one of the poles, whatever it is, and his uncle, and we got married. We came home. I think it was we got out of Grand Central. I didn't talk to him. We left, he went home, and I went home, and
Never the twain shall meet.
that's right. We had to call the rabbi and tell him what had happened.
Mhm.
And I don't remember his reaction. We have papers in we have a picture in our album signing the papers as though nothing had happened. He must have just omitted under the auspices of or whatever it is they say at the state of New York. He must have eliminated that. We went through the motions. Nobody was the wiser. Our parents never did know. I don't know. And it is so long ago and happened so,
Furtively.
so furtively and so quickly that it's as though it never happened. So our celebrations, our wedding date is December 25th, and I have to remind myself when I fill out any kind of legal papers that our wedding date is December 23rd. You're all sworn to secrecy.
Right,
And I have forgiven him.
okay.
It took a long time.
You forgive me for what?
See? I forgive you for not knowing that your divorce wasn't valid in New York.
Oh. So what are the bigamists?
That's right, you would have been.
So what's the big deal?
Yeah, but what would I have been? What would your children have been?
Bastards.
Well, moving right along, tell me about your early years of your marriage.
Our early years.
I guess where you lived, what was that?
Hal had no money.
Still doesn't have any.
he planned the most extravagant honeymoon. First of all, we had a wonderful wedding, absolutely wonderful wedding. And we had this marvelous honeymoon. He had a whole package deal where we went to the hotel in Manhattan, and then we took a plane to Bermuda.
There's a lot to see in Bermuda, and every day we go somewhere else. And it was a lovely place. We recommend Bermuda as a honeymoon site.
We stayed at the Princess Hotel, and we never left our room. We had a wonderful time, and we were on a motorcycle. We
did it on a motorcycle.
we traveled. We bought some souvenirs, as you usually do, that I never liked and never used and never looked at. And we just had a wonderful time. We had no place to stay when we came home. Apartments were very, very difficult, almost impossible to get. My sister promised that she would do the best she could, and she found us a room with a very nice little old lady who was happy to get the money and was happy to have company. We lived there until Michael was almost born. Everything is until Michael, I left my job when Michael was almost born. And we found an apartment. Meantime, Hal had a practice in Brooklyn.
Where was the room that you were letting? Where?
It was off Kings Highway in Brooklyn, just a few miles away from his office. And we were very comfortable there. She let us use the living room, and she let us have company in the kitchen. She was a very, very nice lady. And when we were away, Mildred did follow up, and she found us that apartment. She found us that room. When we came back, while we were living there, we walked along, and we passed a house on East 16th Street, which is where Michael was born. And it was soon after Christmas, I guess it was.
New Year's.
And there were New Year's, and there were decorations that we could see through the window, and the apartment looked empty. So we rang the doorbell, and the landlord appeared upstairs. It was a 2-story house, and she said yes, and we said, we understand you have an apartment available? She said, oh, the pharmacist must have told you. And we said yes, and that's how we got the apartment. And we lived there for until Danny was about to be born. So we lived there with Michael in this tiny, tiny apartment, 1 bedroom. 1 child was in our bedroom and 1 in the living room.
Okay.
It's extremely small. And when I was pregnant with Danny, we couldn't stay there, so we moved to Queens, to Parkside Heights. And Danny was born there. And from there, when Danny was 5, we moved to Brooklyn, to Melville, and we bought our house in Melville.
Okay. I guess tell us about the birth of your kids.
Michael
Was born on.
Michael was born on May 30th, 1953. I had a very easy pregnancy, but a terrible labor. It went on for about 34 hours, but it wasn't painful. In fact, I was the last one to give birth in this very large room of all pregnant women, and I was off in a corner. And, I was bearing up very well, and nobody even knew I was there anymore. And finally, when I felt that it was time, I yelled out, anybody here? I'm here. And Michael was born. And he was a beautiful child, beautiful baby, beautiful child. And he cried constantly, absolutely cried constantly.
He was a colicky baby, and we didn't know what to do, so we took to Dr. Fisher, who was my pediatrician.
Everyone said, let him cry, and cry he did. And to this day, I'm sorry that I paid attention to Dr. Spock. Of course, I did pick him up. I mean, it wasn't that we didn't try, but he was just a very colicky baby, and very, very difficult, very difficult.
But eventually he stopped crying.
Yay!
When he was 13.
When he was 13.
I'd love to to dress him, my first child. I loved to dress him. Everything had to match. And I would wheel over to Hal's office during the day to show him his son. Oh, I must tell you a funny story about Michael. When Michael was born, Hal's mother, Clara, was at the hospital the next day or so, and Hal came, and the two of them went to the nursery. In those days, they did not give you the baby. They kept them in the nursery, and they showed you you didn't feed them. And he went to this door with the glass in front of it and held the baby up, and they came back, and Clara said to me, "Could you believe he said that baby looks like a monkey? That's not mine." And we were so devastated that he would say that, because most babies are not pretty. The next day he went back, they had shown him the wrong baby. It's a smart father who knows his own child. They had shown
It's a
him.
black baby, you know.
No, they showed him the wrong Goodman. There were two Goodmans.
baby.
Oh.
They showed him the wrong Goodman.
So it was a girl anyway. Well, he was always a bright youngster, you know. He went to the Hebrew school, and he excelled in that. He loved that, and he was good in school all through his years, and the teachers loved him.
He was a fearful child, and he would never step into dirt. He was always, would never play in the dirt. He was fearful. I remember we lived on a side street, and nuns would sometimes walk by. And it's understandable, children might get frightened, but he was terribly frightened if he saw a
He
nun.
crossed himself repeatedly.
Right. He was very frightened of handicapped people, and he was very shy. He would duck into the carriage if anybody wanted to look at him.
Lissy was born
Lissy was born on June 28th, 1956. And I wanted a girl. My first baby, I didn't care whether it was a boy or a girl. I did want a girl. I would have taken a boy, but I would have chosen a girl. And girl she was. And we had a little bit of a scare with her. The doctor came in and said he heard some rails, which is sounds in her chest, and they were putting her in an incubator, but not attaching it, just in case. I had a problem. I hemorrhaged, and so I wasn't well after Lissy was born. When I came home, I had to be in bed for a little while, and all my babies, I never took a baby home, which may have something to do with bonding. I never came
You didn't
home.
take Mike home either?
No, he stayed for his bris in the hospital. Danny stayed in the bris with his hospital, and with Lissy I was sick, and they were watching these rails, and she was a funny-looking baby. She had a very round, chubby face, and she had spiky hair. And my sister Mildred, who had very thin hair all her life, was so worried that Lissy had inherited her thin hair. And of course, Lissy grew up with luxurious, brown, beautiful hair, and is a beautiful girl, and she outgrew her funniness.
Yeah, she was an adorable youngster. She was very cute and a good baby. She didn't cry much, and she was well behaved, and everyone said nice things about her. She was lovable. What can I say about Lissy? She's a good kid.
Lissy was a good baby and quiet. She was a very quiet child, always a quiet child. And of course, as a second child, with Danny coming so soon after her, there was a lot of attention to Danny. and a lot of my attention for a baby given to, it's always difficult. And so I think that, who knows?
She was
But that is-
shortchanged.
Shortchanged, as all middle children are, and even second children, first children, I mean, even first children, have to suffer babies, Danny came along quickly.
His birthday is?
Danny's birthday is February 23rd, 1958, and very funny looking baby. He had a head that was too big for his body, and everybody would say, oh, don't worry, he'll grow into it. You know, so he was really a funny looking baby. But he too
Grew up to be a funny-looking man.
grew up to be a good looking kid.
He was a very spirited youngster, full of piss and vinegar.
Okay.
And he still is.
And he was a fun baby. He was a very, very sociable baby. He would talk to the older people. And there was an older couple, parents of one of my friends, who would sit down on their doorstep, and Danny would go over and sit down and talk to them. And he would sit there and chat with them. And he was a funny baby. He didn't mean to be funny, but he said funny things. But he was always playing. He was a child.
But of course, he doesn't live close by, so we don't get to see him too often. But we talk to him on the telephone. And he enjoys life in Mexico. He likes the tamales, I think.
Well, I just thought of one as you were talking that I should have asked earlier, is like, what attracted each of you to each other when you first met?
Not a thing.
How could you ask? Hal was handsome. He was a handsome guy. I never thought I would like somebody with a mustache, but I liked him just the way he was. And I never liked pushy guys or loud guys. I liked quiet guys. He was quiet. He had sweaty hands, which I didn't care for too much, but he outgrew those. And he took me out to eat so well. I mean, we went to such good restaurants, and I never thought to ask him, you know, where's this money coming from? But, you know, he spent all his money on me, and then he ate popcorn, I think. So that attracted me to him. He was generous, and he was affectionate, and he was sweet, and I wanted to marry him. And
I could go for him myself.
and in turn, I forgot about the baggage that he came with, and
Do you have any questions?
Well, what attracted you to Helen?
Oh, she had very good looks. And she was very pretty, humorous. She had this je ne sais quoi. And she flaunted it.
and he liked that I enjoyed the food that he was paying for.
Right.
He said he liked a girl who ate well.
And she ate well.
Right.
And often. Do you have any questions?
Let's see. This is getting back to family life. Tell me about some of the travels you've done, either by yourself or as a family.
Well, you can talk
What?
about the travels that we did with the family.
We didn't do any travels.
We took vacations. We took vacations, but we never had a lot of money to spend on vacations. So I have to say that we were not a fun, you know.
We went to Coney Island, you know.
No, we went to Williamsburg
Brighton Beach.
to get a little education. We went to Cape Cod, but we couldn't find a place to stay.
So we went back to Brooklyn.
Yeah, we had vacations. Our vacations weren't very memorable.
No.
No, we
No.
really didn't have.
How about vacations that you've gone on since the kids have grown up?
That we did. No reflection on the kids, but we did have some good times on vacations. We traveled to Europe. We took several trips we went to England, we went to Italy, we've been to, not much, but we did enjoy the vacations that we took. We went to the Catskills, to some vacations early on. We went to the Catskills with the children.
For the kids. Okay.
And
But we enjoyed it anyway.
I think the children enjoyed it. They had day camp, where they did children's things. And, we did, but nothing lavish, nothing, but we enjoyed our European. We preferred to travel in Europe rather than the States. I really think that's,
It was cheaper,
no, it's not cheaper, but it's
a little cheaper.
just more history. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, 1 year, do you remember that, Lissy?
I remember that.
Yeah,
They stuck
we
my head in the
exchanged,
sand.
you did what?
Somebody put my head in the sand.
I don't know that. We exchanged children, and we both went to the Hotel Brown. So we had Michael and Lissy and Danny, and we took them to Palisade Park, and we took them, I think, to the Bronx Zoo. I don't know. We took them several places, and then we went up to Brown, exchanged children, and they took Mark and Jay back to their house for the next week. That was the only time we ever did that.
Well, did anti-Semitism affect your life? Did you feel
We
anti-Semitism?
really didn't encounter it much. It was really no factor in our lives, and really at any time.
You did feel it in your childhood, when the children called you names when you were small in public school.
Oh, well, yeah, then, not much, a little bit.
In
I
fact,
used to fight with Vincent Bauer, no, you don't know Vincent Bauer. No, he was a spunky little kid. And he used to beat me up until I beat him up. Then he stopped beating me up. But I didn't have much anti-Semitism.
well, you had anti-Semitism when you wanted to go to college, to go to medical school. You couldn't get into medical school. You didn't apply because
I wasn't smart enough, that's why.
No. You knew that the quotas were there. You couldn't get into vet school
No, I
in
couldn't
New
get into
York.
vet school.
because of quotas. No, we really didn't. I certainly didn't. When we lived in Corona for most of my childhood life, I never had any incidents at all. It was a very
Bland,
mixed
uneventful.
population, uneventful. I never experienced it at all.
Are there any anecdotes or stories that maybe I didn't ask about yet that you do want to tell us? Through any of your life, your childhood, the kids' lives, anything.
Well, the one thing I would have wished when we got married, and we talked about Hal's divorce, and I wanted to tell my friends that even before we were married, I wanted to tell them that I was going with a fellow who had been divorced and had a child, and he chose to keep it a secret. And it's 56 years, and I'm not sure that my friends know. I mean, somewhere along the way,
Oh, I'm sure they know.
they must have.
The word gets around, so you can't keep
Well,
these things.
it may or
But
may,
they're tactful enough not to indicate that they know.
but it wasn't the problem that I anticipated it would be. You know, I met Adele, who was his first wife. I met his daughter, Elizabeth. We have met their two children.
James.
And you know they have been here and we've been there, but not
Not often.
not frequently. But that has I have preferred that be right out in the open.
The last question I wanted to ask, was there anything that you want to tell your grandchildren or your great-grandchildren or your great-great-grandchildren who will be watching this
Don't
video
believe
in the
everything you hear.
future?
Can you repeat
Yeah,
that?
that is true. And take everything with a grain of salt, except if you're on a salt-free diet. Obey the 10 Commandments. Bring up your children right. Go to shul on Yom Kippur and Rosh Hashanah. Be good to them. And be good to your parents and your grandparents and your great-grandparents. Wash your hands before meals, and sometimes after them. Of course, they're all dead, except for your parents, who are still ostensibly alive. And that's all.
I would say live by the golden rules that are always a good guide for you. And
And if you're on a gold standard, live by the silver rule.
no, I know that you're going to be good children because you have good parents, and you're going to be wise in choosing your husbands, and listen.
And wives.
And
Choosing husbands and wives.
Husbands and wives, that's
Phil,
right.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, husbands and wives, and listen, and everything will turn out well.
And take
And
notes.
always,
Take
just be
notes.
loving and not judgmental.
Thank you.
Goodbye, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Joel.
Thank you,
Margie.
everybody. Thank you, Director. It was a pleasure having you as visitors, and we really would like to have you back someday. Not too soon.